for imagined architecture. Imagined architecture is a silly phrase.
Right.
Yeah.
Clearly, this is the first thing that's supposed to kick our mind. Right.
Yeah, it's in the first sentence and everything. Like they want you to know.
But what does this feel like? This doesn't feel like an application. I mean, maybe this feels like an application to our architecture thing, but what does this feel like to you?
An application for an academic grant.
Right.
Yeah, annual fellowship is the words there, right?
And so this feels to me, I mean, we do have this heavy academia theme going on, which is really interesting that we just wandered into this, right? If you guys remember the last moment, the last thing, we were in coal mining land, right? And going over this coal mining disaster, and all of a sudden, this is where they fired up for us.
Well, and we have the one character who got out who is maybe a ghost now.
Mm-hmm.
Or the one character who did enter that other world of academia and is lost to everybody else.
Wait, which character was this?
Shannon.
Oh, right,
Because
right.
she was
Right.
She actually went to college.
Yeah. Being explored. Huh.
Yep.
Also, it's the Gaston Trust because no one imagines architecture like Gaston.
Blah, 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 same sort of thing.
I think this is just, we have an actual human note from there.
Right, and I
And
love
the
how
I
they-
is uncapitalized.
Yeah, they don't capitalize anything here, just to
Yeah.
highlight.
But it's also the guy who actually wrote the letter is the one who just does the mail here.
Right.
Who is a doctor? I just do the mail here and reject form applications. But then we're getting into like parody of failing grants, right?
Right.
Grant refusal. Okay, so then we get to see what her job actually is.
Right.
So then this provides us context for our explorations of the space for the rest of this act.
Yes.
Yeah.
It tells us what this place is, what they do. It also,
So what do they do?
well, first off, it provides us a comedy moment, right? This is
Mhm.
one of those moments again where the tone of the piece has changed from where we were previously.
Yep. Stupid tap to click.
Tap better. So this is a place. Her job
Mhm.
is to approve or oppose.
Well, to endorse or oppose.
Right. To endorse or oppose.
So she clearly doesn't have a final say, right?
Right.
She's another step along like the factory line.
Right.
Yeah.
The repurposing of existing but failing buildings. Right.
Yeah. So we have themes of metamorphosis going on here.
Which later they'll call back to with this building itself.
Yeah. So then we get a moment between these two characters.
And we get back into that office work, right?
Yeah.
Like, we move from this moment that we've just had of the sort of uncanny, the weird, right? This funny moment where we're repurposing a distillery into being a graveyard, and now we're into the hyper mundane, right?
It's a little bit. It's skewed a little bit for comedy still.
Mhm.
How's your goal?
Right.
Yeah.
It's
Pretty
interesting
desperate people.
how much more we are focusing on the comedic aspects now
Yeah.
than we were in the last.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Which sets the which works with the change in tone.
well, that is what sets the tone, right? Like that is how we have a different tenor to this one. What's interesting is our main character is still, I mean, is even more pronouncedly wounded here than he was in the previous.
Well, and it exaggerates the way you're given the runaround,
Mhm.
in that you have to
Limp
all
everywhere,
around.
yeah.
Do you think this is mostly for review?
I
I don't think there's any assumption that they need to catch people up.
don't think there is either. I think it is just, again, I think every moment with the dog is a moment to personalize your character.
Yeah.
Like,
A walk's good for a lot.
yep,
Yeah.
how there's a lot of how tough is your character? How does your character deal with this specific piece of adversity? Right?
Yeah. We also get a lot more characterization of Shannon.
Yes, we get a lot more
Yes.
characterization.
in that she's playing. Conway just kind of accepts it and follows it around, and her options are always to cut through it and yell at people.
Right.
I felt like, why is she following him this far?
I think she knows more than he does, right? Like in the just strict plot literal sense.
Well, but that's why now that we get here, they appear to know the same amount.
Right.
Which feels kind of weird.
So I think she knows, or she has some thought that she knows some of what's on the other end of the zero, right? She sort of knows what she's chasing because her relatives have done this before, right?
Yeah. Presumably Weaver.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when they first approach going to the zero, she had an idea or a plan, and now that they're in the specifics of the zero, she's as lost as he is.
You think we're
so
inside or outside?
This is a really important moment.
Mm-hmm.
How do you take this one?
Okay, so we have insiders and outsiders. We've got cultures that people are moving between. Where Conway... Okay, so Conway is this guy who... Let's see, he's moved between jobs. There's even a discussion of whether he was a transient before. And now we have an established bureaucracy. This is... In a lot of ways, this is a very different world from where the characters come from, in rural Kentucky.
Interesting. So I actually took this, and I think that interpretation is totally legit. I thought she was talking about whether or not we're sort of inside or outside of it textually right now, right? And because this entire game is playing with whether or not you are inside or outside the textual experience. And to me, you were clearly in this sort of limbo, right? Because this whole thing is I believe, a metaphor or an analogy, right, that we've stepped into at this point, which exists both inside and outside the text.
Sure.
We're also setting up, like there's the level 1 of imaginary architecture, right?
Yeah.
Of like non-Euclidean spaces and.
And you see that when you get to the map of the zero.
Yeah. Map of the zero is
really good. It's like cave. The first adventure.
Cave?
Yes, Cross the Cave.
So, and you know that they model a lot of this stuff. Yeah. I think it's also very interesting that she goes with the end of the line, right?
Yeah.
But
so this is very interacting with the bureaucracy moment. You hit the button and you wait.
Right, and I think that traditionally in games we don't use waiting that much because it slows down, it destroys the pacing. But here, this whole section is about destroying the pacing, right?
Yeah.
Well, it has its own sort of pace, right?
Mm-hmm. We also have a callback to the whiskey truck that crashed at the beginning.
Right.
Which implies that other people are making this journey. It kind of connects this world to the other one.
Let's try to want to settle a bit, and I'm curious to see if it goes a little bit different. Yeah.
And then this character actually refuses to answer.
Right. How long does it dodge for?
And then we get something,
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it takes the characters out of the realm of us, the players. Right? You work like me. Like, these characters are in the game, and they only exist in that world. Yeah. But she takes care of the heating and cooling, and watches the front desk. I wonder if it's a reference to Brazil.
I could completely see that. I find it interesting that we get there's something not quite right about the Distillery Boys, right? Like that they don't seem like they fit in the Kentucky side of the world. And yeah, I'm almost certain it is a reference back to that crash that happened earlier.
Yeah. Well, he said it was a whiskey truck. When I get home, I'm a different person. I don't have to think about it.
And there have been throughout this several references to this life outside of their office occupation where we get to see artistry a lot more, right? And yet this is the context that we actually get to experience.
Well, and this is the context. And we'll see it more later with the other chapters. There are a bunch of characters who practice art outside of their work, but nothing ever comes of it because their work constrains them.
Right.
Yeah. And then you can see in this, it's not just street names, it's imagined architecture. They're doing something kind of like artistic expression.
Mm-hmm. Except for they're taking it and making, and this is why the academia thing is really interesting, because they're taking it and making it a novel, right?
Yeah.
Imagined architecture should be very fascinating, but what they really do is they take things and repurpose them often for even duller things, right?
Yeah.
I really like this line at the end when she says, "Have you seen our grotesques?" Right? Grotesques usually be fiction, right? And then
it's also grotesques are the gargoyle or
right.
ornamentation on building.
And the gargoyles here are these TV sets, right?
Which is really good, like televisions as decorations.
And as the thing to sort of as the warding device, right?
Curiously fresh.
And we get all these very mundane like shows that you could definitely see on American television. And of course we get the call to the hermit crab, and the hermit crab becomes a motif here.
Yeah.
Well, grotesques are also they're often a metamorphosis as well.
Yes, that's true.
So we've got hermit crabs which change all the time. We have the birds repurposing old materials to build something new. Elevator.
Well, here specifically what they say about the elevator, that the elevator is in motion, but the attempt is to create the feeling of non-motion, right?
Yeah. It transmutates the building.
Yeah.
Well,
it literally says the building should feel flat, right?
Well, it's another note of playing with expectations, right? Like this is not what it appears to be.
And here's just the switching, right?
Then we have this machine rod.
Yeah, I was looking at that earlier.
So
and we almost have. See how you got the ties,
yep,
right?
We got boat ties, and then crabs come up. Like there's a tide coming in and out. So it's put in a real space. Like we are literally in a cave underground.
Right.
And the architecture is like these public buildings built in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, no, I mean, very much looks like a lot of campuses that Pioneer see.
Mm-hmm.
I think the barrier is an interesting thing, right? Because why is it even there?
I mean, it's kind of like the end of the road. It's the kind of barrier you'd see at a dead end, or like when something is closed off a road.
Don't they start by saying they passed it twice already?
It sounds familiar, but I don't know if it was this thing.
I think it was this thing. I think when we originally went to whatever choice we made originally, we said that they had seen several. Who was in the envelope last time?
We don't know yet.
Okay.
But we're getting pieces, right? Service manual for sewage pumps and then very banal architectural plans for a bungalow, a place you have to live. And then something strictly poetic.
Yeah.
And
the
Bureau of Secret Tourism.
Bureau of Secret Tourism with your Cthulhuoid instructions
to bizarre locations. Kind of like instructions to navigate a game, right?
I could see that, yeah.
And those pieces come together. We've got sewage pumps. You have the maintenance of the game engine, writing code. But you need a splash of death poetry, especially how you feel when you're in the end of a project. When you're on part 2 of 5, yeah.
I also find that first line interesting because I feel like it's another reference to the player, right?
Absolutely. Like they're definitely making the player do more waiting. You know, that was absolutely intentional.
Well, yeah, especially given the character's walking speed.
Yeah.
So I think we now have to give the people what they want.
In the same order?
Well, I think specifically the people always want bears.
Yeah. Bears.
Bears. Floor bears.
Floor bears. Alright, hold on. We got a question.
What is the question?
I read question.
Hold on. That was my test question. Damn it. I wish to clear out the queue. Nope.
Dan is programming Twitch. If Twitch becomes self-aware.
Damn it!
Question, hi.
There we go! Sorry.
Question. Could this game be considered a visual novel?
I don't think of it as a visual novel because... And it's hard. So, this is going to get us in trouble because visual novels, I've gotten into lots of arguments about how to define visual
so visual novels, I think we usually think of next to adventure games, right? Like, that's our point of reference, where we say it's like an adventure game, but it's clearly something else.
I would say that it's even more static, that the difference is that it is a novel that is in a digital medium, but the interactivity is not the mainstay. And here, I actually do think the interactivity is essential to the experience.
Yeah, like the pacing of the characters' physical movements.
Well, even though
designed.
all of the interactivity is inconsequential, which is what's really interesting.
I mean,
like, we're not solving puzzles.
It's inconsequential in the sense, in like the direct sense, but the fact that like Conway has to walk at a specific pace to a place is very relevant.
But like, it doesn't. We're not changing anything by our decisions.
And well, right, we are changing who we think the character is,
Yeah.
which I think is really important. Which I think happens less in visual novels. Actually, usually I find that in visual novels, it is you're hitting branch points, which you're never hitting here, right? Instead,
you've got content that's semi-hidden.
Yeah.
But there's always one linear path.
And it's all those are like enriching details rather than branching.
I didn't get to check it out earlier. Does the bear floor change after you get them to play the organ?
I have not checked that myself.
I hope they have a bear dance band.
Okay, so the kind of floors that we have too feel indicative of. Okay, so we've got diagrams and drafts, archives and records, bears, conference room and clerk's offices. This felt to me like the work of making a game. In a lot of ways. You have the silly joke, which is important. You have the records, which are completely unorganized, and then you start trying to add rules of don't add anything after F.
Well, I mean, that's why we have the floors that we have. They can only be listed after F.
Yes. Bears is on floor too.
Right, like, no, seriously, like, we do not
Conference room is on floor. See?
That's why we have a clerk.
Yeah.
We literally don't have anything throughout.
Well, there was a bit in here about checking things back in and not checking things back in.
Yeah.
That was also very similar to game creation.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, I feel like they signed themselves up for a 5-game series and got to the second part and were like, this is going to take 6 years. Screwed. Okay, so Greg sits here at the very top. He's an interior spatial analyst, and he can't help you.
What's interesting is the most senior person is the person who can help you check in.
Mm-hmm. She's pretty senior. Do you feel like Rick is her boss, or?
I felt like Rick was a coworker.
Okay. He's always standing, and he gives you directions when you walk down there.
That's true. It's just the initial interaction with them felt much more like coworker interaction than boss interaction.
I like how every time you come to this floor, he's got a record that's skipping.
Mm-hmm.
And he obviously hasn't fixed it himself.
Right.
Implying that he's just sitting doing the same work forever. And you can fix it and make things move forward, but he finds it very distracting.
Right. And you can see him just watch you as you get.
Yes. They have elaborate head tracking technology.
Yes. So do the bears.
They do. It's very disturbing. Should we go to the first floor?
Sure.
Okay, so we have this bit where we're sent around on a bureaucratic mission, but at each stage, or at almost every stage, Shannon can interrupt it and just straight up ask, "Who is Lula?"
Have you had the patience to go through the entire bureaucratic loop?
No, we could do it.
Oh God, here we go.
We're looking for Lula. So we've got a character note, obviously, of the difference between Conway.
Right.
Conway
Well,
always answers following instructions, and Shannon always says, no, just tell me.
And they parallel, I mean, they give us those options every single time.
Mm-hmm.
I like the fact they all end with happy to help.
And they're just like being kind of helpful.
Right. Which is how this bureaucracy loop often works.
We chose the other option, and we went to this guy. So.
Yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of these, none of these paths actually change things, right?
So I feel like the option to skip all this is also reflecting on our willingness to play the game by the rules that it gives us.
Yeah.
Put your requisition form in the inbox, and we'll get to it as soon as possible. Oh, do I have a requisition form? Ask quick messages.
I do enjoy how you hobble over each one of it. And how none of them mention your leg until you
except for Lula. Yeah.
Oh no! No!
I failed at driving.
It's
your tap to click.
I wondered why your
tap
tap to click wasn't on.
I'm curious to see, because they make that comment about patience earlier. I'm curious to see what does happen. I'm gonna have to go back after this and drive through that whole thing. So here,
okay, we're connecting the two character lines, right? Because we've clearly introduced Lula as a character like our protagonist. So we've zoomed in on her closer than we have with almost any other character.
Mm-hmm. Well, and she's the most colorful one in the office.
Yeah,
she's the brightest,
colorful one.
Right. Well, and I'm not sure. Again, I'm not sure that that's literal, right? Like specifically the way she describes the bad joints, like the parts being connected.
Can you elaborate on that?
So I feel like it is at the very least, a description of the bureaucratic machine, right? She talks about the joints, right?
The parts aren't connected to each other properly.
Right. That they're continuously grinding. And so, but I think this is where we get back to a really important part where we start talking about how the zero works. So, how does the zero work?
Zero is, okay, so zero is not a point A to point B thing. It's a journey that having these experiences progresses you along, right? The journey is complete when there's a certain character moment, either in the character in the game or the player of the experience. So you have to you move along through growth.
So here's my question: do you know where you need to get? Does the zero know where you need to go, or is
who do you
zero
think said that the part of it is figuring out where you need to go?
Right, and I guess my question is the zero mapped to that place, or does the zero grow with you as you decide where you need to go, right? Is the zero a linear experience? Will these characters always get where they need to go? Or is this one of those places where the zero is this field of experience that will lead you to that may lead you to where you need to go, that will guarantee lead to where you need to go, but where you need to go may be different depending on what experience
I don't feel like I know enough to know where they're coming from on this. I feel like if this is shaping up to be, there's hints about it being about the process of creating something. Creating something has a destination and it has an endpoint. We see a lot of characters who have failed to create something. She's failed in her application. The gas station attendant has an old game that he collaborated on with her that he failed to finish. And so in that sense, there would definitely be an ending point. But we can take it more as a general life.
Well, the interesting thing is, I think they both stopped along the zero, right? Both the gas station and her have not crossed the zero, right?
Right.
They've stopped somewhere along the way. That may be the mistake, right?
Were there other characters that were implied, like Weaver, that have implied to have gone through the Zero? I don't actually remember.
So Weaver knows about the Zero. She's been characterized as she's certainly unknowable to the people back in Kentucky.
Yeah.
Right. She came back. Okay, so she came back, and then the debt was too much, so she just left. That's what they said. She just packed up and left, and now I hear from her every once in a while.
And how much of you get in the house stuff do you take as metaphorical versus literal?
Well, we've got a cultural divide and the financial thing. So she went away,
right?
And she came back, but she didn't bring anything good with her.
Didn't she go to college?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But she came back with bills from college at the same time as she left partly, to go to college. She had a better job.
But I thought it was the house. I thought it was the mortgage on the house that was the...
Right, but I believe her college debt was also factored in.
Might be. I do like the fact that she brought nothing good back from college.
Well, yeah, Shannon just says she could read the books to figure out. She could just see how bad their situation was.
Right.
Therefore, she left.
Right. She couldn't help, and so right.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how she weaves back into this. All right, let's keep going.
And in a way, much less deliberate. Implying that we can't logic it out, right? We have to feel it. But heck, we're looking for Dogwood Drive.
And what do you feel about this? I do feel like, yeah, and about what they do, right? About this. And I do love the second part, right? We're back to the artistic side of things.
Yeah. Okay, so Dogwood Drive is a destination on the Zero. She used to be on Dogwood Drive.
Right.
And now she's not.
Dogwood Drive may be at the end of the Zero, too.
Yeah. And back then, she was
there.
Yeah, she was making sculptures. She had a dog.
Right.
Dogs are a good way to get to the Zero.
I mean,
yeah.
It was Dogwood Drive.
Yeah.
And so, let's keep going, because I think here we go.
So if our dogwood is the same as her dogwood, then she didn't recognize it? Or she didn't get there because she hadn't journeyed deep enough?
Well, I like the fact that that she says there's a lot of dogwoods, right?
Yeah.
And that in some ways there may be one specific for everyone. That hers may be different in the specifics, but the same in purpose, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Did she say something like that? I get the metaphor that like there are many dogwoods, there are many paths to travel, right?
Right.
But I didn't get the sense that like there's a unique path for everybody.
Well, it's mostly the fact that I see her as having taken a step. She sounds like she was more content when she was there than when she was here. Right?
I made sculptures versus I make proposals to make imagined sculptures, and they get rejected.
Right. And otherwise, I do bureaucratic functions.
Yes.
All right, so let's keep going, because I think that this section sort of really defines a lot of when they start talking about how and why they renewed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be so spiteful. So there are a couple places where you can remonstrate.
Yeah. I find it amusing that she says they were friends. I also think that it's amazing that she takes it that way, right?
Yeah.
It is.
And then she tries to shut you down.
Right.
Now, you can have Shannon talk to her. She's going to cut right through it. She pauses, taking it back.
And now she's talking about Joseph positive.
Mm-hmm.
I find it amusing that only technology causes this problem.
Yeah.
That as human beings, we can all understand these different dogwood drives are. That they're all dogwood drive.
Yeah.
Right? but the machines are not.
If we're dealing with this,
I like specifically this line, right? The
main
computer
collisions
has
is a real.
no sense of ambiguity.
We've got difficulty in transmitting message into games, which is through the production process, which we might be seeing right here. We also have creativity through any sort of organized system.
Well, and I think it's also about the transmission back, right? He's talking about trying to transmit ambiguity through the medium of game, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The computer has no ambiguity, and yet that's exactly what he's trying to deliver to us through this computer medium.
Also from the academic thing, though, we have situations set up. We start to compartmentalize and name things in order to teach them.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to break things apart into discrete chunks.
I like the fact that what they have here in abundance is records.
Out by courier.
Of course. O for Odinums.
Yeah, that's exactly how it is.
Or S for specific. Anything specific, look under S. But that, like, it's like... okay, so that could just be a joke. It's also truly incompetent naming an organization.
Well, I mean, I think it fits into your...
Well, you spend a lot of time when you're programming, as the project gets bigger and bigger,
right,
cursing your past self for being so bad at organizing things.
Well, and specifically often for naming conventions.
Yes.
Like,
specific. I'll file it under specific.
Is this the floor with the organ?
No, that is the conference room. Should we activate the organ?
Does it matter when you activate the organ?
I don't know.
Let's go try it, whatever.
Because we did it at the same point last time.
Oh, then let's do this first and then do it.
Yeah.
Run back and forth. Yes. I also feel, did he get more gray hair on his side? Like,
no, but the characters are bigger than they were allowed to be in the last one. I noticed that, and it felt like it actually made it feel like a sequel in that, wow, everything's sharper and clearer. They made the graphics better. Or wait, they just zoomed in.
So...
Okay, so we've got comments on the organization system. This is, again, more like the programming metaphor, where you leave inscrutable comments. I like that. They're like, just stop filing things.
Just work on what you can.
And I love how...
impossible this instruction is.
Right. How it doesn't even make sense even with the examples they give.
Yeah. Cars is often used as a programming example of object-oriented programming.
Sure.
Because you say car fits in a garage and it needs to interact with it.
Right.
Yeah.
What's amazing to me is the first thing you said about car, garage, right? Was your first word association, which is past our app.
Or the fact that both cars and air quality fit in our thing, but like air quality is A, but doesn't work.
Well, the thing that you choose any one thing, and it will have associations that are outside A through F.
Yeah.
Right? No, any given thing, right? And so that's...
But if there's a method to this, like in programming, you could know that a car has automotive drive-in brakes and doesn't have other things. But in the real world...
Except for you do that, and then later in your game, you realize that you have to add gasoline to that list, and you're screwed.
No, you give it magic juju juice.
The Emmons is still outside of our list.
There was a page that you had skipped the first time through. When you when you finish the back cover, page 63 shows up.
Yes, you look at it and it doesn't tell you anything.
Okay.
It's also worthless, like the rest of the instructions.
So I find the organ moment really interesting, right? Because I do feel like we are juxtaposing this mundane office with magical fantasia.
Mm-hmm. I think that was... So this bureaucracy moved into the place of the church.
Can you go to the 5th floor?
He doesn't do anything different.
I know, I'm just saying, because you hit the down button. I'm just wondering if it's relevant. So the fact that you hit... the fact that you hit the up arrow...
Maybe it takes a long time to come.
Or you go down the bottom and then you come back
Maybe
up.
they simulate the elevator carriage. And his record is skipping again, by the way. fix that for you.
It would be amusing if, as the elevator door closed, you got up and set it back to skipping.
It's gonna look at you.
With his creepy head.
That turns a little bit too far. Okay, so this place moved into the church.
Mm.
Specifically, we've got the organ. Makes music out of air.
I like the fact that it's adjoined to the conference room, right?
Where you plan it.
And, well, I mean, organ is also very mathematical. Is perhaps the most mathematical of instruments.
But it's played by a dude who's grilling.
Right.
In a bathing suit.
I find this...
They outsource the music.
Or is this the creative spirit that's left? That then filters back. Like, this is the beginning of things. And this is the purest form of it.
Well, I like the fact that it drains light out of the rest of the place. And no one else seems to notice. But, like, clearly this is super important to them, right? Because there's a lot of time and attention focused on this, and like this scene, this cut scene, takes longer than any other place where they take control of it, right? And it changes the whole office.
Yeah. And I feel like this is in the way that once we go back, we can see the conference room. Everybody started the presentation. We're looking at what could be sources of inspiration.
I'm also curious. I'd have to take another look at it. The band moment from the first one. To see if the musical cutaways, like, because the other one is also sort of semi-transformative.
The band is as you're walking back down the hill, like come. And you've
had it right after the transformative moment in this case, right? You had the house like breakup. Mm-hmm. You had the, and so I'm curious to see if they're playing with musical parallels.
And it says these are disconnected images, right. But they're clearly not.
Well, they're clearly...
Or these people are putting them together.
Right, they're clearly presented in a way that is said to... is ostensibly has meaning, right? But I think they're saying does not.
Or at least whoever is looking at them thinks it is.
I was curious to see what unpopular anagrams is an anagram of. But...
Giorgio de Chirico is a really modern painter who painted buildings.
Solitary buildings, though, right?
Yeah. It was described as from, like, seen from a train. Like, you see the building that sticks in your mind. Influenced surrealism and also the cover of Eco is kind of based on his work.
The American or Japanese cover?
Japanese.
I thought so.
The American cover...
Right.
It's based on Leprechaun 2.
Good bears.
I was pretty sure you were talking about. I was like, yeah.
Bars.
How they can dance. Well, bears don't need light.
Maybe they're just watching people. Let's see if they get bears at the end. Like, they're doing anything different.
Bears.
Because out here we look at the top of the organ and no, it's the same.
No, bears are looking at the right.
What's really interesting is the fan at the top implies that you are inside, right?
Looks like an exhaust fan.
Right.
Yeah, like you would need to keep a giant underground system.
Is the guy on the top floor? Oh no, right.
Yeah, he's got a light. He's still working.
So back to, we've had these two moments, right? We have basically the organ moment and organ floor. So why is there such a stress on that juxtaposition?
On pre-organ, post-organ?
And on organ versus, literally the camera pans, right? You pan over and you pan from mundane, bureaucratic, academic setting.
Well, the game does that a lot. It zooms in on a specific moment that it's trying to draw attention to in between two different worlds.
I think it's important that they're together, though.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we both live in the same place.
Right. And the question is, are we passing from one to another? Because, right, they said they occupied it, and is that the remnants of the old one, or are they actually sharing this place?
It is actually, like, texturally, it's a remnant.
Right. Okay. I mean, yes, I get that texturally.
And then there's a bit where you can ask them, why did you buy this space? And nobody can really tell you. My read on it is that it was, like, it's important to the process. It's the only way they knew how to incorporate it and transform it into something else.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing so, they broke it.
Sure.
There's still remnants of it around.
And what do you think that says about what does that say in terms of the game itself and the overall idea of this game?
The nature of art is fragile, right? The creation of art is fragile. The creation of mindful living. Brave. Jeff, oh, the lights come back on after a while.
Yep.
Did it happen when you talked to them?
We've only moved into this new venue a bit recently. And then the Bureau reclaimed it.
And I like that the old congregation has been directed to one of our storage facilities.
It gets into an interesting thing.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that it's where they sort of street.
This reminded me of The Pale King, David Foster Wallace's posthumous novel, where it's based on IRS agents. There's a bit in the beginning where a character who's moved to the middle of Illinois, like in the middle of nowhere, is picked up by an IRS agency vehicle, which is a repurposed ice cream truck, because it was efficient. And so then they described to him how it's followed around by, like, crying children. And it's actually driven by an old ice cream truck driver because they didn't want... It was cheaper just to keep him on as a driver. Although he doesn't know how to drive faster than 40 miles an hour on the highway. A specialist regarding ailments of the joints.
So what's interesting about this? There's something, like, sort of direct plot-wise that I found interesting about her saying this specifically.
Like, she's giving you instructions to fix herself when she can't fix herself.
She has the exact problem, right, that she's describing with ailments of the joints and limbs.
Well, didn't she say earlier that she goes to this guy?
And yet he hasn't been able to, like, fix her. Does she actually say that she goes to him?
Okay, she says, like, Dr. Truman said blank about mine.
And that's why she knows he works at night.
Yeah.
But I find it interesting that, like, he hasn't been able to do anything about her ailments. And also we get this last line, right? His home office is in a small neighborhood on the east edge of Poland. We have no idea where that is, right? That's not come up, right?
Yeah.
And yet it's on the zero, right?
It's unusual how people in this building don't talk about the zeros.
Right.
Although,
well, the zero has never been literal, right? Like, it's always.
But it's like it's space inside this game now.
You're on the zero.
Well, they never. Yeah, but, like, I don't know. Just the tonal shift of the two.
Now that we're actually in the zero.
Yeah, like, it makes sense that they would talk about it differently.
When they talk about the zero, is the word still...
Yep.
Okay, good. Because I know it is whenever your character talk about it even here.
Yeah.
But I hadn't noticed whether or not the other characters still have the text edit for the zero.
Yeah. I really like these hermit crabs that show up.
I do too. And I'm curious to see what... I mean...
Conlon, over here.
What triggers them showing up? Because is it just the organ, or is it you finishing the series, or what is it?
I wouldn't know how to do it without cueing the organ. I couldn't tell you.
And so clearly these guys are all wearing office supplies, right? And we've already had hermit crabs brought up. We foreshadowed these hermit crabs, right? So what are they saying with this, right? Because this is, again, kicking your brain. This is a moment outside of what you expect when you come down. So they're highlighting it for you. What are they trying to say with it?
So hermit crabs grab other objects They don't build their own thing, right?
They grab discarded objects.
Yeah, but then they create something functional out of it.
Yeah.
So we're creating homes for hermit crabs out of discarded office supplies. In the same way that we are going to be transmuting all these experiences, all this mundanity, into something approaching art.
Interesting. Because I actually took it the other way. I have to think through it more completely. But I thought they were talking about making home runs.
Living in your experience, rather than trying to make that stuff.
Yes, and specifically living in this world that functionally doesn't happen, right?
But hermit crabs keep growing,
and they shed their shell, right? Yeah, and that I think is important that these things that's what has to happen for all of these. I took the hermit crabs as sort of representative of everyone in this.
Sure.
Yeah,
they live inside of paper clips.
Yeah, they're currently residing in there, but not permanently.
Well, that is the hope, right?
Yeah, the hermit crab will move on. Grow and move on.
The hermit crab will these people. But, all right. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking about that, like whether it's a stasis or a passive movement, because I think I was thinking of it as a hermit crabs are using something functionally in that they're part of nature.
Sure.
Generally, we don't find nature being tricky.
Interesting. So I very often see the crab as the pair of scuttling claws, right? We don't really have the most positive general middle associations with crab, and I mean it is. We see it as a scavenger of sailors, right? And so it's interesting that we came at it from two different perspectives. I'm not sure that any one is more valid than the other. I think they just offers other interesting ways to view the clearly metaphorical narrative that's going on.
Yeah. Well, and we've got all this reappropriating television as a source of.
Do we have any thoughts or questions from the stream?
We have a bunch of questions. I figure we can just, because we're almost done with this, we can just go through and do the questions after the break.
Yeah.
Delayed gratification. Whoop.
Yep. Well done.
Just another office. So you can ask.
Sure. Let's do it.
Church now. Sure, it's very nice.
And there's so many times, right, that we do that with so many things in this life to so many people. Right?
I like how she says, "Go see it for yourself," even though she's clearly not seen it.
Right. No. Oh yeah. Okay. Good. They do too. Still.
Yeah. Get back on the zero. Drive until you hit the crystal.
Yep.
Then turn around.
I like
then turn around.
Then turn around. Yeah.
It'll make sense once you get there.
What's surprising is that you don't have another conversation with the dog.
Yeah, I actually thought that was weird too.
I don't think they're making a point through it.
That last hermit crab, did it actually show up?
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah. Oh no, not that one. There was one
There's
last
like
time.
One way over.
Yeah.
It's nothing.
It didn't actually register last time. Yeah. That was the one. That does nothing. I think it's just a bug, but.
There's a bug in the first one. We missed a couple characters in the first act from the gas station. There's a character that shows up to the gas station who is looking for someone's brother.
And this is why y'all should play this game and not trust us to play it for you, because oh man,
there's a lot of stuff going on that we're not even reaching.
This game is very cool.
Alright.
Yes.
So, do you want to take a break here?
At some point, we should discuss the very structure of the zero. But
yeah.
Is the crystal click-onable, by the way?
Not really. Things work a little bit different in zero, as you might expect.